Okay, I think we're streaming. Let's just give it a moment to let it show up. I haven't seen it on the feed yet. Great, we're live. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm doing well today. I slept for 12 hours. I don't know why. It was, it's unheard of. There's like, I'll take it. So
Beautiful.
I'm really ready to talk about a calm nervous system today because I've got one. That's how
Awesome.
I'm doing. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I did not sleep for 12 hours.
No, I'm sorry.
I can speak about the calm nervous system from the other side.
Yeah, the need for one. Yeah, right? Oh,
Mhm.
yes, I know. Yeah, my son was waking me up this morning. Who knows why? So, all right, we are here for our series on young people and teens. And the more, I'll just speak to, the more we've been having these conversations and coming back to this place, I'm really tuning in all the more so to what teens are telling me and what they're going through. And I just really believe that these kinds of conversations and the topics that we're talking about are really important. So it's good to be here with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've got so much love and passion around these topics. So, um, yeah, we're going to talk about creating safety for teens to share with their parents, with their adult people. Yeah, because that's who they're with most of the time right now in COVID and the pandemic. And, all the time we want our kids to keep sharing with us when things get hard for them.
Was talking to a friend the other day about like what's number one in parenting, right? And I shared mine, and then she shared hers, and she said, I believe creating safe space for hard feelings in our children is number one. And she puts that absolutely first. And I think it's a really beautiful idea, and it caused me to reflect on my own parenting and what really is most important. I think we would both agree that yeah, creating that emotional safety for anyone, like, and this could be in romantic relationships and any kind of relationships, but we're talking here about like adult to teen. But creating that emotionally safe space is absolutely crucial. It is like the foundation upon which any authenticity and growth can occur.
Yeah. Saying no matter who you are, you're loved here in this space. Yeah.
And you're safe to say whatever you need to say and share whatever you need to share. And I am not going to take it personally and be reactive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So we said that we were going to start with a conversation about safety, but I actually have a fun question that's popping to mind. Surprise. I'm surprise you with it. So as a young person, as a teenager, can you think of a time where you needed the safety to be able to ask something or say something? I have my funny story. Maybe I can share first or second. But was there a time where you needed your parent to create a safe space, and what happened? Like, and they could they do it? Could they not do it?
I would say that yes, they could do it. Um, and that also there are things that I simply wasn't able or interested or willing to talk to my parents about. And there was no one else in my life that I felt that safety with to be able to have those conversations. And that's probably pretty damaging actually developmentally, to have these things. I mean, teenagers are going through such big things, right? I mean, it's just drama, like so much drama, internal drama, right, all the time.
Yeah.
And to not have an adult to be able to go to and be safe and share, I think that then you probably end up spending more time with a therapist as an adult because you didn't have
For
that
sure.
You know, weren't able to work through those things in real time as you were processing them, and so they just get buried.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have,
What's your
I
story?
know the funny story. So I won't tell the exact question, but I was in middle school and there was this talk about this sexual act. And it was like slang for this sexual act. And I didn't know what the slang meant. And now our kids today have internet, so they could just like Google, what does this mean? Right. But we didn't have that. And so I went home and I remember the feeling in my body was like total fight or flight, total gut wrenching. Like, oh my God, I got to ask my mom this question. Because if I go to school tomorrow and don't know what this means, there's going to be all this social ridicule. So I have to try to figure out like what this means, because everybody else already seems to know. And I asked her and I just saw her like totally avert her eyes. And she's like, I don't know. Now, I totally believe she did that, but she wasn't going to tell me. So like the safe space wasn't created. And, I'm thinking about the ramifications for, kids when we don't talk about sexuality, or we don't talk about drugs, or we just like want to like not go there and pretend it doesn't exist. Huge ramifications. I think that's probably more in our generation than maybe present day. But I think there is this like avoidance, like this not my kid thing, or I don't have to talk about all that because they won't be exposed to that. And then the kids are like finding the information online, and who knows what they're going to find with that influence. And so, yeah, being available to answer all the questions. That was one thing I had written down in preparation, was like, be willing to answer any question.
Yeah.
Like if they're coming to you and they have already gone through that process of working up the courage to ask the question, answer the question. You can always ask like, so what prompted you to ask this question? Why are you asking this question? But answer it, because that's going to create safety and connection for them to come back and ask you more and not go to other places.
Yeah, I mean, think about like adult teen relationships. In most relationships, there's often a power asymmetry, right? And so whenever there's an adult with a child, there is a power, there's a power inequality, and especially if that parent is, or a person is in a role of a teacher or a mentor or a coach or whatever they could be. And it's really the obligation, whoever holds the more power in the relationship, to be the one that creates the safe space for the one who doesn't feel empowered to share, right? And to share things that might be hard, like really hard personally, and that might even be directed at that person, And so that's a responsibility that I've always taken really deeply with the teens that I've worked with, is, how to create that safe space for teens to share authentically what is going on in their worlds and ask the hard questions. And it's such a beautiful process, right? When you can see somebody open up and share something that they may never have shared. I mean, in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
I've probably had 20 teens share things that they have never shared with anyone else with me, right? And I value that, I treasure that, I take it as a deep responsibility. And I know that just the safe space for them to be able to say these things is really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's hone in on safety, just from a biological, a physiological perspective, and safety in the mind, in the body, and creating safe space. So there's a lot of things that we can say that help create this space. And if we're talking about creating space for teens to share, I would imagine that listeners would automatically be thinking about communication. Like, okay, well, how do I communicate so that there's this safety? But I actually want to go, to the place of the nervous system, to the place of the biology and physiology, and talk about safety. And we've been talking in the series a bit about fight or flight. We've also been talking about the need for parents to have their own self-regulatory practices so that they're not activating a sense of fight or flight in their kiddo. But let's talk about what fight or flight looks like in kids, or in any body, so that we can talk about safety in a more realistic way. I mean, we need to be quelling fight or flight. And in these charged spaces of teens talking about hard things or parents wanting to talk about hard things, there could be a lot of fight or flight in both bodies. And so, yeah, let's talk about fight or flight. So what does that look like? What are some signs to look for? I'll pass it back to you for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, when that amygdala sends those hormones out and the hypothalamus is, taking the next steps, there's like, it's, the symptoms are the closed body, the slumped shoulders, the averting eye contact, the just the inability to have an open heart and open body in conversation. And
can I add some things right in there? We're talking about fight or flight. So like working in private residential schools with kids that had a lot going on inside of them, like those are the two things that you literally are looking for. Are they fighting you? Are their voices raised? Are they coming, in your direction with a raised voice or a fight stance? Or are they wanting to get out of there? And parents are seeing this in their houses every day with their teens. There's like a going toward, or I got to get the heck out of here. And that's the same brain function that you're talking about, the amygdala firing that's saying like, I don't want to be here right now. Go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah. And so again, the responsibility's not on the teen to manage this first and foremost. It's on the adult in that situation, right? And if the adult isn't regulated enough to not also re-engage, right, to react, to be reactive to that fight or flight, because when you're in a relationship, emotionally charged relationship with your own teen, then the fight or flight has gone both sides.
Yeah.
Right. And the adult cannot ask the child to regulate when they are unregulated themselves. And so, anytime you're an adult in that situation, like you just got to step away. You got to step away until you can figure it out and do your own work, because you're not going to be able to create a safe space for a kid. And that's why it's really nice to have other adults in your life that can do that, because they're not as activated, right? They're not as activated by the teen, and because they don't have all these layers of parent-child issues that have accumulated over the course of a lifetime, which all get elevated, right, in those moments of fight or flight. And so it's challenging for a parent, and other adults need to be there, and parents need to do the work to be able to create that opening.
Right, to create your network to be able to like tag out. When I worked in really pretty volatile school situations, we would tag out. Like, oh, I just went into fight or flight. They got me, like now I'm in it with them. Now I leave. Right. And that was it. It was like, you could say to any coworker, oops, now my lid is flipped. I'm in it, tag out. Okay. And that was just like super common. So yeah, we want to create the safe space by being safe. So if we are volatile or if we are overreactive, that doesn't create safe space for kids to come near us of any age. Another thing I know we talked about this before too, but modeling. So if you are losing your cool, you can pause and say that and model it. I'll just kind of do it right now. Okay, I notice that I'm starting to want to escalate. I'm starting to want to raise my voice. My fists feel tighter. My muscles feel tighter. I don't really know what to say right now other than like using an angry voice. And so I'm going to take 5 minutes and go breathe and regulate myself and then come back to the situation. Can we come back in 5 minutes? And just model like, I'm not okay right now. And this is normal. And another generational thing is like this expectation to have your shit together. Sorry to say it like this, I love some good old transformation. And so I love that this period of time in our world is really allowing people to say, you know what, I'm not okay right now. I'm not okay right now. And like, I want to be with each other in this place of, I'm working on some stuff. And so we're normalizing that. Just a bigger picture view right now that came to mind that I think it's really good. I think it's good for our young people to be like, this is hard. This is hard. I'm not sure exactly how to navigate this right now. We're in it together.
Yeah. And I've been through some really, really challenging times in the last few months, and I have
Yeah.
modeled, yeah, that vulnerability with
Yeah.
my kids and shared with them, not always on the day of or in the moment of, but often maybe the next day at dinner, saying, "Hey, boys, you probably have noticed that I've been really, really down,
Yeah.
that I've been really struggling," and you know, modeling that emotional openness and authenticity with them. I maybe one of the great gifts that I'm giving to my kids is to they're seeing that openness in me, and I think that itself creates some safety for them because I'm not directing it at them.
Right.
I'm not attacking them for it. I'm sharing with them,
Yeah.
and the kids are often so sweet and like lovingly supportive of challenges, and say things like, "Dad, I'm just so grateful that you're taking such good care of us still, even when you're down." You know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
really emotional.
I've been going through this computer problem that's so hard to solve, and it's affected my stress level, and it's affected just my mood and like my height of resiliency. Like I was used to functioning at one level, now I'm being given this challenge and my resiliency has to rise. And so I've been in this challenge, and I've modeled this with my son, and he's just like, you got this, mom. We just keep showing up. You got this. And so I really love that generationally too, that I think as conscious parents or parents who attempt to be conscious, we don't model perfection, or we allow ourselves to be imperfect, which is creating a safe space. I would say when it is not safe is when we're expecting our kids to do something with our emotions. So parents have to watch that. Like if you are expecting your child to make you feel better, you're out of line, and get yourself some therapy or some help, because that's a transference that we don't want to put on our kiddos. um, I actually had a thought back when we were talking about safety that is still there, so I want to honor that ping. um, I've been thinking lately too, and some teens I was talking to this weekend were talking about touch, and how deprived of like touch, even in the form of hugs, that they are. And so if you think about, I mean, adults are experiencing it too, but like we're more isolated, we're more behind screens. We may not be having the physicality of connection that really does help to create more safety in that system, that nervous system, and the proprioception, which is like how we know where we are in time and space. So one of the things that I've noticed about my son is that he's coming to me and asking like for hugs multiple times a day, like more throughout the day. And he's looking for that. Who knows exactly, but that like, where do I belong here? And the body needs that. The body definitely needs that. So yeah, just to name that. And I don't know what comes up for you when I say that, but
Well, yes, physical touch is huge, and I guess I'll just share an anecdote about like creating emotional safety, um, which is there was some conflict in my house this weekend, not involving me, but involving two children, two teens actually, and wasn't like horrible conflict, but they separated themselves from each other for the rest of the day, and I knew it was going on, and um, because they weren't together. So, but I also knew that they probably also both need a little bit of space, and so the next day I went in to talk to the one and really just like, check to see what kind of space he was in, and then asked him, "Hey, I noticed that there seemed to be some conflict. Do you want to tell me what happened or what's going on? And, you know, most of these, I was lucky because I got to see it. I was like in the space where it occurred. But most of these now are occurring digitally,
Yeah.
right? And so like the kids are getting their feelings hurt because somebody doesn't like their post or somebody says something or whatever. And then, you know, parent dealing with a moody teen, you don't even know what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I think it's a real challenge. And I think inviting kids to even share, like, tell me how, you know, I think that every parent of a child under 16 should be looking at their kids' social media posts on a somewhat regular basis, just scrolling through, and then it helps provide a little check for them, for the teen. And it also, more importantly than that, it creates an opening for conversation of like, ooh, is that okay? How did that feel? Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, because this is all happening online and invisible to parents, it makes it that much more challenging to find, to know what's going on, to know what questions need to be asked, right? And to create that safety around something that's somewhat invisible to us. All we see are some symptoms from teenagers that are already moody, right? So anyhow, that's a big challenge for sure.
Yeah. One thing that came to mind as you were talking was sometimes they'll give you an inroad. They'll just give you like a little tiny inroad. Um, so something could be going on really big behind the surface, like you're mentioning. And the thing that they mention is really small. I know my child, we go through this, and I realize like I'm not listening closely enough to what he's saying, because if then it came up a second time, he would say, "But I told you about this." And I was like, okay, what am I doing wrong? Because the thing I want the most is for him to continue to share, right? I want to be the safe space. I want him to come to me like no matter what. And so I started to notice that what he gives, his inroads to what is really going on in him, they're so small that they could be one sentence or less. Like it could be a phrase. And I have to listen and I'll catch it. And I want to give this tip for parents. It's like so often we go into, well, I want to know more, or I want to analyze, or I want to give advice. But don't do that. Don't do that first. The very first thing to do in any like active listening situation is to just repeat and acknowledge.
Yeah.
Oh, that happened. And then if you stop right there, there's usually more to come. Like if you can catch the inroad and repeat and let them know, then it's like, yeah, and then I felt this way. Yeah, and I was upset about this, and it's just so much more productive. I'll tell a story. My child lives between two houses, and he's the only child in both houses. And he understands that mom has mom wants to use emotional language. Mom wants to talk about everything. Mom's a former educator and mindfulness instructor. It's like, I want to go to the places, right? Dad doesn't make him go to those places. Like if he chooses to talk to dad might go to the places, but he doesn't encourage going to those places. And so, that's a topic that we acknowledge. And what I had been finding was that my son was, preferring to not talk about things. Like, well, if I can get away with not talking about things, then I don't want to talk about things. Until this past week, he did want to talk about something with dad, and it didn't get acknowledged. And so he came back to this house and mentioned to me that like he had tried to talk about something authentic and he didn't feel heard. And inside of me, I was having this like, we're finally having the conversation. Like there were so many places that I just impulsively may have wanted to take that, like, let's talk about it all. Let's, and just like dive in and really acknowledge it. But I totally had to play it cool. And, okay, so you're noticing that. Yeah, I'm noticing that. And then he expanded, and it was like over the course of 4 or 5 days that he kind of worked this out and then finally figured out like what to say to his dad. But if I had come in that first day and said, great, this is a great opportunity, you should say this, heck no, that was never going to happen. Like I had to give it the space, regulate myself, and ask a question or two. Like every time it came up, like just a little bit of like, okay, it's cool if we talk about this.
Yeah.
You're welcome to talk about this. And just really allowing it to be a place where they can know that they can come back.
Yeah, I mean, the phrase you used at the beginning of that story, active listening, right? I mean, this is our growth work as the adults in the lives of other adults and particularly teens, right? And I've sat through, participated in, led hundreds of parent-teacher student conferences with teens, and the number one, and had hundreds of conversations on the phone with parents about their kids and so forth, and just kind of been witness to the whole kind of parent-teen interaction in very intimate settings. And the number one piece of advice I would give to parents is stop giving unsolicited advice to your teens, right? Like 9 out of 10 times, as soon as the parent starts saying like blah, 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 then it just becomes blah, blah, blah in their head. And
They're gone.
You can see the body language gone.
Yeah.
You can see the eyes roll. They're done, right? They don't want to hear your advice anymore. They've heard it. They know already what you're going to say, right? Once you start talking, they already know what you're going to say. And that what's much, much more effective is asking questions, being curious, being patient, and then if you really have something to say, asking, would you like to hear my perspective on this? And don't launch into it until you get a genuine yes. Right? Like, wait, they don't want to hear, they're not ready to hear. And why would they want to hear if they haven't been heard? Right? So it's like these skills that many of us in our generation are just not that great at, right? Because it's not part of our educational system. The most important skills in our life, right, of emotional intelligence are not a part of our educational system. And most families are also, pretty weak and immature in their emotional intelligence. And so is it any wonder that we struggle with these things? And so as parents and as adults, our job is to learn how to listen, right? Learn how to create that safety. And then if you want to say something, ask, right? And wait till you get an authentic yes, and then share. So it's like this top-down dynamic, right? This hierarchical dynamic just playing itself out. And nobody wants to be on the bottom of the hierarchy, right? Nobody likes this feeling of being, this bottom side of the asymmetrical power relationship. And it's important that this person here come down and even down below and just make space for this one to share and be open and honest. And then maybe come back up and say, would you like to hear what I have to say? Right? So it's like a great process of humility, right, for the adults to do that. And basically just learning the skills of emotional intelligence and the skills of active listening. And they need to be taught. We don't come with these things automatically, especially if our family struggled with this kind of communication.
Right. Yes. I really like what you just did with your hands. I talk with my hands so much. I look at the videos that I do and I'm like, there I am. I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm talking with my hands. But I'm going to continue what you were saying. So in terms of fight or flight, like we were talking about in the beginning, if you're power over and you come toward, what's this person going to do? They're going they're going to cower, they're going to fight up against, like to try to get their power back. They're going to go away, right? So I love, if this is the parent, you're talking about like regulating where you are in proximity to this being so that they feel safe. I thought you were going away from me.
I'm running away on flight. I'm running fight or flight, Sarah.
Right. And so then I would go back and get low, just like you said. I would go back and get low and say, tell me more, right? I'm here. Sometimes my child will be escalating and I don't even know why he's escalating, but I'll come back, come get low, and I'll say, I care what you're saying. I'm here. I'm sorry if I missed something, but I'm here, and then like creating the co-regulatory experience for there to be more safety. On that note, though, Andrew, I want to ask you to talk about this because I love your perspective on this. And we are talking about creating safety. But when you did this and you said get lower than, okay, we're talking about conversations and not being combative, right? But there's a parenting style that I know you have something to say about, where you get lower than your kid and stay there. And then the child's trying to be in charge. And so I want to say, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about that, because creating safety by not, being an active parent or being too permissive or not being in your child's, business is not what we're talking about. Like, we want you engaged, we want you active, we want you relational, but there still needs to be a parent-child dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, all advice is contextual, right? And so any advice is bad advice in the wrong context to the wrong people.
Right.
So giving generalized advice doesn't make any sense, right? If a parent has an authoritative role, then yes, humbling. But there are many cases where the children are running the ship, right? Yeah. And it's like it's not the boundaries that your kid needs, right? Yeah. They actually want an adult authority figure in their life who can set clear boundaries, can say no, and that has to be balanced with respecting them, right? I think the mistake that I often see made is that parents believe that respecting their kids means like giving into what they want, right? They're not equipped to handle that level of responsibility.
Exactly. And if we're talking about creating safety, there is a certain safety in your kids knowing that you have them and you have that container. Like, you are providing that. They don't have to provide that. They don't have to figure things out. They don't have to be in the adult brain. Many children that I worked with over the years had been given too much of that responsibility to take care of parents or to figure out the family dynamic. That's not their part. And so one thing that we would commonly say in therapeutic education was, this is an adult decision. This is an adult conversation, and we've got you, right? And that was a way to communicate, like, you don't have to worry about it because you're a kid and we got you. But when, in the progressive town that you and I live in, when I would use that kind of language in other schools, that could be taken as, too authoritarian or too top down. And I'm actually all about that. Like, I'm the parent, you're the child. I definitely respect and love you, and you know that, and yet you're not in charge. You're not in charge.
Yeah, so I've had, just all these instances where I'm like in charge, often by myself or with somebody that's not, super strong next to me with a bunch of teens, and I'm having to handle the group. And that's not an easy situation, right? The will of a group of teens saying, well, we don't want to do this, right? And I've got to navigate, one, having them feel respected and heard, right? And then also acknowledging to them that this is not your decision, right? And I'm actually going to make the decision. And once the decision is made, and this is really like parent-teen stuff comes all the time, right? With just a parent in their house and they're trying to navigate these things. And I want the child to be heard. I want them to be respected and honored as an equal in the sense that their perspective matters. And if it's an adult decision, then it's an adult decision. And if you have something to say back, which is what happens with teens very strongly, right? Then, okay, like you can share with me one time and I will repeat back what I'm hearing you say. Do you feeling heard? And I'm going to share one time my rationale for this. And I'm going to ask you to be able to repeat that back to me, right? You're asking to be heard and I'm asking you to hear me too, right? But first I'm going to show that I can hear them.
Yeah.
Once I show that, then say, am I hearing you right? Okay, I hear you. And this is actually not your decision to make and I'm going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. So wonderful. We are at about 35 minutes right now. And I have one more thing that I'd like to say. And so I want to encourage closing thoughts at this point. So, talking about creating safety, having conversations that are potentially difficult conversations or conversations that you want to invite openness about in the future, have them early, have them before they are active issues in your child or in your household, and really normalize we can talk about these things. So, I've been talking to my kid about drugs and alcohol since before most people would think to talk about your children about drugs and alcohol, because, we talk about human decision making and why people decide to put various things in their bodies. And, so now he's been exposed to, some reality. He's in like a drug education through his school counselor right now, and they're learning about these things. And so now he's asking, well, why would people, why do this? Or what's the difference between, a drug like marijuana and a drug like heroin? I certainly want him to have the safety to come ask those questions. I really want to be like, yeah, they're totally different drugs. One does this, one does that. I want to be able to have those conversations with him before it's a fight or flight conversation. So I want to be able to have those conversations way before he's a teen in a situation, he's an older teen in a situation, and he's presented with, do you want to take this drug? I want him to have all of that information, right? And then I want him to be able to say, like, no, I don't do that because I choose not to do that, or I got to call my mom now, or, it's like, if we're talking about teens and identity, which is what this whole series is about, information given in safe conversations and having that dialogue with your child is going to really equip them when they're out in the world to know their sense of identity and where they stand in relation to something.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. That's my closing thought. I could go on about that, but I won't.
My closing thought is, so we had an issue. My 14-year-old was watching Breaking Bad, and he was 3 seasons into Breaking Bad and into Orange is the New Black. And before it was like, oh, okay, you're watching these things, so
Wow.
maybe you should talk about these things, right? I mean, those are some pretty intense shows. Yeah. So now the work hasn't been done beforehand, and the work now, it's like a live thing. And, waited till it was cooled down a little bit, and then like, so how are those shows going, right? What do you think about that? And he had these really amazing responses of like, Dad, I'm learning about life through these shows, right? There are all kinds of like realities that come. And so, yeah, hearing him and then expressing why both his mother and I think that he's not developmentally ready to handle that. And the thing about teens is they always think they're ready for it. They always think they're ready, like, and they're often not, right? Ready for sex. Oh, are you really ready for sex? All right. Ready to try drugs. Are you really ready for that? Ready for the incredible bombardment of, anxiety producing and incredibly violent images that are just all over. And, there's, I'll say one last thing. We realize that there's no clear technological way to stop him from watching those things. So we restricted his Netflix down to, whatever, more appropriate level. It doesn't matter. If he really wants to watch that, he's gonna get his friends log in and watch it, right? There's not a way to prevent those things. You can do your part, but there's not a way. And so ultimately it's about education, right?
Yeah.
About communication. It's about the relationship that you have. And hopefully through that conversation, he's less interested in watching those shows. I don't
Yeah.
know. I hope, and I hope he'll continue to talk about them with me.
Right. Yeah. I recently asked my son, like, what that thing that we saw on that show, do you think that's a good idea? And he was like, obviously not. So thank goodness he's getting that. So wonderful. Well, I feel a little like I could continue to talk about these things, but we'll come back next week.
Yep.
And yeah, thank you everyone for watching. Thanks, Andrew, for another great and passionate conversation. And people can find you at Aspire High. Please say it.
AspireHighAsheville.com.
Okay, and then there's mindful mentoring, that work that you're doing with teens.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm working with teens as well. And I guess this is the one thing that I'll add, that what you just said about the media and the exposure that they're getting from all of these things on screens. I went from being a school principal and being a really holistic educator for a really long time, studying trauma, studying mindfulness. And then my personal path took me toward energy medicine and looking at things of the soul and, our path as humans and as souls on this journey. And there can be deep damage done through this media exposure. I mean, like Breaking Bad is talking about things that on a soul level, on an energetic level, that has really big impact. And if we're talking about identity, and we're talking about identity of the human, but of the human knowing their soul, which is really what I'm interested in for teens. I'm interested in teens in knowing themselves on the deepest level possible. And so, they really need to be taught how to bring themselves back from situations where they felt something was, like I'll use the word fragmented, like, oh, I lost a little energy in that peer situation. Ooh, when that boy tried to do that, I definitely didn't feel strong, right? So we call back the power. We call back personal power. We call back identity and come into that space. So that's some of the work that I'm doing with teens right now, which yeah, when you were talking about the places that education won't go, I was like, that's why I had to leave. That's why I had to leave, because I want to do all this kind of work. So yeah, all right. Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, we need to normalize healthy experiences, and what's being normalized now are fragmented, unhealthy experiences through, for instance, Orange is the New Black and Breaking Bad. I mean, what effect does this have developmentally on a kid when they're binge watching episode after episode of these? What effect did it have on me as a 40-something-year-old watching this, right? And yeah, we need to create more normalized experiences of sitting around the campfire, going camping, doing the sweet fun things, and because we don't want the Breaking Bad to be like normalized, of like, this is what human life is going to be like, because it will become self-actualizing.
It will, because TV actually sparks the subconscious. I mean, that's where it's going. Like if you're in front of it, it's actually activating the subconscious. And so then that gets in there. So my son and I were watching a show that was it's pretty interesting. It's about time travel. And yet there's a ton of violence. And so we would watch an episode in the evenings and then we'd read afterwards. So we weren't trying to go to sleep right after that. But, I was still experiencing dreams or effects of that in my sleep. And I talked to him about it. I was like, we need to space this show out, because it's definitely affecting like the subconscious of the brain. But because I was talking about me, right? I wasn't saying you stop watching this. It was like we were doing it together so I could talk about it. So we started to watch some more positive and feel good things, like family movies and feel good things. And it's been really lovely to just, not have to mitigate all that shit all the time and just like feel good, like just spend some time in the feel goods. So one last thing
We can't stop talking, Sarah.
I know. This is the final thing I want to say to parents. When your kids share, thank them for sharing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. See you next
Pleasure.
week.
Yeah.
See you soon. Bye.